Welcome everyone to the workshop Introduction to Social Explorer. My name is Molly Webb and I am a GIS developer on the data services team at Washington University Libraries. So I just wanted to say that I come to this workshop with the approach of a user. I am definitely not an expert in Social Explorer, but the reason why I wanted to give this workshop was because in my work over the past several years, I found it to be a really handy tool. And I just wanted to share some of my learning with the WashU community. So if you have any questions, I will certainly try to answer them, but we may need to reach out to the folks at Social Explorer if there's something that I'm just not sure of. Speaking of the folks at Social Explorer, I just want to give them a shout out. There's lots of great content available out there in terms of how to work with Social Explorer. I definitely looked at a lot of their materials in preparation for sharing some items with you today. So thanks a lot to the folks out there at Social Explorer. Just an outline of what I'm going to be talking about today in the hour or so that we have together. First off, accessing Social Explorer for WashU users. It is a subscription-based service, so typically you're going to access that through the WashU website or the WashU Library's website. We're going to look at how we can explore an area or a specific topic, how we can use Social Explorer to share a map or a story. And then switching gears a little bit, how can we download spatial data from Social Explorer? Also, how can we download tabular data from Social Explorer? And then if we have time, which I hope we do, I'm going to show you how you can use GIS to create your own map using Social Explorer data. So I'm just going to switch over to a web browser here. And the first step to accessing Social Explorer is just with the WashU Library's website. So library.wustl.edu, or you can Google Wustl Library. It should be one of the first things to pop up. Whenever I come to the library page, I usually start with research and instruction, and then articles and databases. This gets me to my articles and databases page. And from here, I click on the A to Z database list link here in the middle of the page. If you're not already familiar with this A to Z databases list, I recommend doing some browsing on your own. There's lots of different resources available across the academic spectrum. So take a look at this if you haven't already discovered the A to Z database list. I'm going to go in the search bar here on the right-hand side of this page, and I'm just going to type in Social Explorer. And then Social Explorer is the first result that pops up here. So I'm going to click on that. Okay, so since I've been doing a lot of work in Social Explorer, my login information and the fact that I'm a WashU user kind of gets saved in my browser cookies. And so I'm already seeing that Social Explorer is recognizing that I'm licensing this with a professional plan provided by WashU in St. Louis. If you haven't logged into Social Explorer before, you may be prompted to log in after you go to the databases page. And if you're off campus, I should say, you will likely be prompted for this proxy server login, and you'll just enter your Wustl key here, just like you would logging into any other WashU application. After you log in, you should see this professional plan provided by Washington University in St. Louis message here at the top. Okay, so I'm seeing that right here, so I'm good to go. First thing I'm going to talk about is just how can you explore the data available on Social Explorer and take a look at the different data points and topics that they have available. Now, Social Explorer is not a data creator. They are more like a data aggregator and repackager. I find that they provide their information in a really nice, neat, easy to use interface. So whenever I'm wanting to pull data from a source, say like the US Census Bureau, I could definitely go to the US Census Bureau website and click through the interface there to try to download my spatial data or my data tables. But since I am a WashU user, I really enjoy taking advantage of the really easy to use interface that Social Explorer has. So I'm going to start by just going to Explore. And it's going to open up with a default map to at the scale of the US here. I'm just going to close out this start tour because I don't want to go through that right now. So by default, it's going to show us this population density map, but there's lots of different things that we can do with this. And so to start off, what I'm going to think about is my research question. So let's say that I want to investigate age distribution in our area in St. Louis. And I'm specifically looking for where are the people that are, say, 65 and older in our area? Where do most of the people, or what is the distribution of people in that age group? So I'll start off just by searching for an address or geography. I'll just search for St. Louis, Missouri, and it'll offer me some options here. And when I click on that, it will automatically zoom to my area. Now, one thing to note here is that when I was zoomed out to the at the United States level, it was showing me the data at the state level. As you zoom into your map, if you have this geography level drop down set to automatic, it will fluctuate on the spatial unit or the geography level that it shows you based on your zoom level on the map. But I can see here, I'm zoomed into St. Louis City. It's still showing me population density, which is certainly fine to take a look at, but I'm interested in seeing what other data I have available. So over here in the left corner, I've got my kind of control box here for my maps. I'm going to click on Change Data. And then it offers a bunch of kind of topical data points as well as a year selector here. For my research question, I think I'm going to be interested in the most up-to-date data available. So I'll stick with 2019, but it does go back several years if you're interested in looking at historical data. I'll just say choose age for now. And what it's showing me is the different data sets available. So I'll just collapse these just so we can see what we've got. But in terms of showing us age data, we've got the ACS 5-year and 1-year estimates here, some supplemental estimates, and then some general population estimates. Typically in my work, I'm interested in the ACS, which is a sample survey that the Census Bureau sends out to a sample of the population. It goes into quite a bit more detail than the decennial census, which happens every 10 years. The ACS is sent out continuously, and it asks questions about a range of topics stemming from, of course, your demographic information, age, sex, race, as well as educational attainment, information about your dwelling, and things like that. So there's a wealth of information available in the ACS or American Community Survey. If I scroll down to my options here, I just want a nice, neat, give me just 65 and older. That's what I want to see here. So I'm just going to click on this and it's going to update the map based on that data layer. I'll go ahead and close this now so we can see our control box to show you that if I want, I could view this data at the census tract level as we have now. I could view it at the census block group level, which is a smaller spatial unit. I could view it at the zip code tabulation area unit, and so on and so forth. Lots of different geography levels there. So I'll go back to census block groups for now. Also, if I'm not crazy about the look and feel of my map right now, I don't really like this color palette, I can go up to my shaded area drop down here. And I can choose, okay, do I want to show my data as shaded area, as bubbles or dot density? These options will disable or enable based on the data layers that you've selected. And I can choose my color palette here. So let's just say I'll go with a teal color palette. Now down in the lower right-hand corner, this is where my legend is kind of living. So I can see right here, what do these color breaks, what do these mean? If I want, I can look at a more detailed view and see, okay, here's what this color means, here's what this color means, so on and so forth. If I want, I can click on one of these to isolate that particular category or that particular breakpoint. So you can do that here, or you can just show everything. Okay. Let me see how I can get back to that. All right, and I can show those different data breaks there as well. Just making sure I stick with my notes here. Okay. So that's just a quick overview of how you can explore data using Social Explorer. One thing that you may or may not be aware of, I certainly wasn't really super aware of this functionality until I started really exploring, was the ability to share my map or even pull together several different maps to create a story. So for these items, we're going to take a look at the upper right-hand part of the screen here. First off with this compare button. So if right now, obviously, I'm just looking at a single map. If I wanted to say, look at two different views side by side or be able to compare interactively, I could choose the side by side or the swipe option here. So say I'll just choose side by side. And now I'm looking at the same map. But if I wanted to, what I could do is I could say, okay, show me, let me change the data in my right map here. And so for this map, I'll turn off 65 and older and say, show me everyone under 18 years. So I'll be looking at kind of both ends of the age spectrum here. Okay, so I've got my 65 and older map here and my 18 and under map here. So this is just a way to compare these. When I pan and zoom, the maps are linked so they zoom together. And another way I could do these kind of visual comparisons is using the swipe method. So if I swipe, turn that on, then I have this kind of swipe slider in the middle of my screen, and I can slide back and forth to see the different data views. All right, so my website is only just keeping up with my mouse there. So we'll let that go ahead and finish drawing. Okay. If I wanted to, I could flip the maps. So that means that whenever I turn this off, the map on my left-hand side is going to be the one that's going to stick around. So I'll click off. This takes me back to my 65 and older map. If I wanted to export this map as an image, I can do that here using the export as image button. So that's going to export an image with the legend and everything like that. And then also I could share this map. So right now, I can share this just with this link. The users on the other side don't need to be logged in or have an account or anything like that. They'll just view this map right as it is. I could also embed this map on a website, or if you're using a learning management system like Canvas, you could embed these maps in your Canvas pages. And I could also send it as an email too, if I wanted. Now, one thing to keep in mind if you're sharing the link is that this link is going to be live. So if I'm zoomed in here into a certain part of St. Louis, then if someone were to go and view that link, they would also see this view here. So just something to keep in mind. Okay. So another kind of cool thing that I mentioned before was the fact that Social Explorer now allows the ability to create a story, which can be one map or several maps linked together. So to do that, you will need to log in. So even though we're licensing through WashU, you will need to create a personal account with Social Explorer to be able to save your map or your story. Okay. And so if I wanted to create a new story, I could go to create new, map, story presentation. And so let's just take a look at what that story would look like if we were to create that. So I'll just call this STL City, 65 years and over. And it lets you choose if you want to go with the general, I want to see everything about the United States, you can click the top option. If you know that you have a specific topic, you can certainly go down and select one of these topic areas. And then also one thing that I wanted to note is that while Social Explorer focuses on US data, they do have some international data available. And so if you scroll down either on the homepage or here when you're creating your story, you'll find these down towards the bottom of the options. Okay, so I'll choose create. Okay, and if I wanted to, I could say, okay, here's a cover, my STL City map, give myself a description, age in St. Louis, and then start is what your users would see when they come onto this cover page. They would choose start, and then that would take us to the next slide here. All right, so let's just say that I have changed my map to, age 65 and older like we did before. One thing that I did want to mention is that you can mask your map data. So if you only want to show data for, say, Missouri, you can add a mask that will show only your area and then show all the surrounding areas in this light gray. You can always turn the mask on and off by using the little toggle switch over here on the right. If I wanted to add text to this map, I could say, okay, here is a view of STL with a description here. There's a few text editing options here. And so with this slide, now that I've added some information, it will show up as a sidebar here when this map slide is shown. If I haven't entered anything for the slide, then the sidebar won't show up because there's no information to show up. So if I just say preview story, this sidebar where I entered in those few bits of text would show up here. And then you can navigate forward or backwards depending on how many slides you have entered. Okay, let me exit preview. And just a few other things to round out some of the cool options available here. Besides adding a mask to your data, you can also filter areas by criteria. So if you're only wanting to show, say, you know, my category, which is age 65 and older, you could create a query and only show those options or those whatever units fit your criteria, similar to the way that we could turn them on and off in the legend down here. All right, so say you wanted to show overall population density in one map and then break it down by age in subsequent maps, you could do that. Social Explorer gives you the ability to upload your own point-based data to your map. So if you have, you know, a list of locations or something that you wanted to show, you could upload those here. You can add additional layers, and you could turn your background to the satellite view background if you wanted to do that. Another cool thing is that you can annotate your map too. And so it gives you a variety of drawing tools as well as text here. You can add place markers and save those as well in case you wanted to mark up your map. After I save my map, my story, then I can share it here. And so it's warning me that I have some unsaved changes. Yes, that's fine. But what I wanted to show you was the link to share, but also if you had other users that you wanted to work on a shared map or shared story, you could add your collaborators here. And that way you'd all be working on the same map. Okay, so that's just a really quick tour of exploring data and creating a map or a story in Social Explorer. I think that for creating simple maps, this is pretty cool. You don't have to worry about any of the data wrangling or anything else that you do on other web mapping applications. All the layers are right there, ready for you to just add to your map and then share them out. If you're familiar with the ArcGIS Online story maps, after I was exploring this, I was like thinking to myself, oh man, Social Explorer is really kind of giving story maps a run for their money a little bit in terms of content providing and just a really quick and easy way to share maps. So I'm sure as time goes by, they'll add more features to the story creation. But for now, there's some pretty cool stuff there. So I invite you to explore that if you're not interested in actually getting the data, but maybe just doing some exploration and sharing, maybe taking a look at some of these options here. Okay, so I'm going to pivot to the data download section, to downloading spatial data. So semi-recently, Social Explorer has started to offer spatial data available for download. If you are on the homepage, Social Explorer, you just go to this geodata section here. So I'll click on that. And it gives you the different geography levels that are available as downloads. So one thing to note is that these are going to be for the entire United States. So, you know, it might take a few minutes to download. They're going to be pretty big files. You can always bring those into some kind of GIS and whittle them down. But just as an FYI, there's going to be for the entire United States. So we've got zip code tabulation areas and census block groups and some other spatial units here that may be of interest. public use microdata or microdata areas, school districts, some historical state boundaries. So a lot of stuff to explore there. What is particularly handy is the historical spatial data, because sometimes it can be a little tough to get a hold of some of that. I'm just going to click on census block groups. And this gives me a list basically by year of the census block groups. So this goes all the way down to, if you go on to the next page, to 1990 census block groups. But if you just want the most up-to-date ones, those will be here at the top. So you just click shapefile, and that will activate a download of a shapefile of all the census block groups in the United States. I've already downloaded this into another map, and so we'll take a look at what that actually looks like here in a second when we move on to the GIS section. So that's where you can get your spatial data. One thing that I want to know about the spatial data is that it is just the geometries of these particular geography levels or spatial units. There is no additional data associated with them, so it hasn't gone through and matched up all the income and demographic data and everything. That is kind of to be done in a separate application. This is just the spatial data only, so just those geometries or those shapes. I'm going to just click on the little icon to get back to the dashboard. Back a few times here. Maybe I'll just go back to the tab. And then, so second, so that's the spatial data, pretty easy. Second is the tables. And this is what I feel like is the most powerful part of using Social Explorer, is all the different data tables available. So when you click on tables here on the left menu, you're going to be presented with all of the different data sets that are available. So most of the time, at least in my work, I'm looking for decennial census or one of the American Community Survey options. But there are also other data sets available, including some newer ones, like they do have some COVID data in here, I believe. I saw that somewhere. Maybe that's under health data. There we go. So some different data sets available if you're interested in exploring some COVID related information. We've got some FBI crime data, so on and so forth. But by way of an example, let's just check out this top, second to the top option, American Community Survey 5-year estimates. So if I click on this drop down here, the different historical ACSs are available. The most recent one is the 2015 to 2019 ACS. And what that range means is that these surveys were sent out and responded to anytime between 2015 and 2019. So the responses could be as old as 2015 or could be as new as 2019. That's what they mean by that range there. So once you've selected the data set you're interested in, you can click Begin Report. And this takes you to a screen where you can kind of walk through the geography type you're interested in and the data points that you're interested in. So I'm going to pretend like I'm trying to create a map similar to the one that I created in the web interface and get a map of different age ranges for St. Louis City. So I'm going to click on my geographic type drop down. And so this lists out the different spatial levels that they have data for. So I'll choose block group here. And then if I want to whittle it down even further to a specific state, I can do that. So we'll choose Missouri. And then I could whittle it down even further to a county. If I scroll all the way down to the end of this list, I have St. Louis City here. And so I could, if I knew the different census tracts that I was interested in, I could even narrow it down to a specific census tract. But for now, my options are all block groups, which is all block groups in the United States, all block groups in Missouri, or all block groups in St. Louis City. So I'm going to select all block groups in St. Louis City and click Add. Then I'll click Proceed to Tables. On this screen is where I'm going to choose the different data points that I want to download. So it's already showing me that I'm exploring data from the ACS right now. And if I scroll down, here's all of the different data points available. So just, scrolling through, I've got information on housing units and of course, age, sex, race, educational attainment, high school school dropout rate, unemployment rate, so on and so forth. So lots of different information here. You can choose one or more of these different data points. You certainly can load it up and choose as many as you want if you want to explore those. So just by way of example, let me see if I can go back and find my age information. Okay, so I'm going to choose this age short version here just to keep things simple. So I've highlighted that in our selection box, and then I click Add to add it to the current table selections. Once I could certainly add in more if I wanted to, or remove some as well. If I had too many in this list, I could highlight them and then click remove and they would be removed. Once I'm happy with my current table selections, I'll click on this Show Results button. And that creates the report and leads me to this reporting page. So generally, whenever I'm working with this data, I kind of brush right past this reporting page because it's showing me my data points, of course, but it's showing me each block group as a column. And most of the time, that's not really what I'm interested in. What I'm interested in is just getting this data out of this application so I can put it into my own application and work with it. So I'm going to go right to the Data Download tab up here at the top. So there's different options that you can choose in order to have Social Explorer kind of prepare your data. You could say, okay, give me DBF friendly column names, which means there's not going to be any spaces of special characters or anything like that. You could choose to have a tab delimited file instead of a CSV. But for now, I'm just going to go with the defaults. And so on this page, there's two files that I want to make sure you download every time you use Social Explorer. The first file, of course, is the data file. So that's going to be this CSV block group data. So I'm going to just click on that and save that to some place super accessible for me right now during this workshop. And then if you get nothing else from this workshop, please remember these two words, data dictionary. All right. Always download this data dictionary text file every time you download data from Social Explorer. And I'll show you why here in a second. So again, those two words, if you take nothing else away from this workshop, data dictionary. Okay, so I have these two files downloaded now. Now I'm going to go to my desktop so I can show you what these files look like. Let's escape out of my PowerPoint here so I can get to my desktop. Okay, so here's my two files. Of course, if I was doing this for real, I would not save these files to my desktop. I would save them to my project folder wherever I was keeping all the data for my project. So first, let's take a look at the CSV. All right, so I'm going to open this up. It's going to be probably kind of tiny for you. So let's see if I can just zoom in on that a little bit. Okay, And then also I will have to change this to a number so we can see those. Okay, so just to refresh our memories, this was a data download of census block groups and some age information. So over here in the first column is my unique identifier for every single block group. So in the US Census applies this unique ID to every single block group, and it always starts with the state FIPS code, which is 29, and then the county FIPS code, which is 510 if we're looking in St. Louis City, and then other identifiers based on the census tract and then the block group. So each of these values in this column here are going to be unique for this census block group. There's also other information about the census block group. It's block group number 1, so on and so forth. But really the key column we want here is column A, the GeoFIPS. I'm going to scroll all the way to the right side of my screen now. And so in these last columns are the columns that hold the actual data that I downloaded. So I've got these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns here. The only problem is my columns have these really kind of cryptic codes for column headers. So I'm not entirely sure what this data actually is. Well, that's where my data dictionary comes into play. So let me open that text file up. So here's the data dictionary text file that we downloaded when we downloaded our data table. So if I take a look at this text file, in this table summary section here, it tells me what each of these variables means. So my first variable, the one that ends in underscore 001, is the total population for that block group. Then 002 is the population under 18, 3, 4, and then finally underscore 005 is my age 65 and older. So going over here, I know that this last column, my underscore 005, this is the number of people over the age of 65 in that block group. And I might also want to make sure that I know that this 001 is the total population. I might need that if I'm going to be presenting my data in the form of a percentage later on. Okay, so I've downloaded my data. And since I'm a GIS person, I know that I want to show my data in a map. You might have some other purpose for this data, but for me, I want to create a map. So I'm going to go to my GIS now. This is a GIS application called ArcGIS Pro. If you're interested in learning more about this application, please reach out to me. I would love to tell you all about it. But for now, I'm just going to use this as a demonstration. So the first thing I want to show you, I have my map window here in the middle. I'm going to show you what that full census block group file that we downloaded before, or that we pretend downloaded before. This is what that full file looks like. And hopefully I won't regret this, but I'm going to right click and go to zoom to layer. And so this is going to show you, yes, we really are showing all the block groups for the entire United States. And so I didn't want to work with this entire file. So what I did was I used some selection tools that are available in GIS to isolate this huge file to only the block groups in St. Louis City. So that's my layer here, St. Louis City. I'm going to right click and go to zoom to layer. And I'm going to turn off my full block groups and turn on just my St. Louis City block groups. Okay, so I've got my block groups here. I've also brought into my map the CSV file that I downloaded before. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to right click and go to open. And this looks just like the table that I showed you in Excel just now. The key column here being the GeoFIPS column, which has my unique identifier for every single block group. So each block group in my table has this unique identifier. And also, I just want to take a note that there's 360 records in my table here. So I'm going to close this table. Now I'm going to look at the attribute table for my block groups. So I'm going to go to my STL City block groups. I'm going to right click and open up this attribute table. Okay, and so I can see here, looking at these columns, I also have this identifier here that looks very similar to the identifier in my other table called GeoID. So whenever I want to take my spatial data and link it up to my tabular data, I have to have a column in each of my tables that has a unique identifier that can be used to match these records up. And in this case, it's going to be GeoID. Now, the one thing that you have to remember is that when you go through the process of joining these two layers together, our columns have to be of the same data type. So if I look at, if I right click on this field and I go to fields or columns, I can see that my GeoID is a text value here, okay? My my block groups shapefile has my GeoID as a text. So that's a string or a word, a text value. If I open up the table of my CSV, I won't be able to see the fields, but it's likely that the GIS is reading this as a number. And so I need to have two either textual columns or two number columns to match together. And so the easiest way to deal with that is to add a new column to your spatial data layer. So what I've done here is I've added a new field here, and I'm going to just do one quick little thing to be able to add a new field just to show you that process. So I'm going to click on the add button. Okay, and it gives me this field list here, and I'm going to add GeoID, and I'll just call this num, GeoID number. And I'm going to make sure that my GIS reads this as a double, which is a numeric data type. And so after I've added that new field, I'm going to click Save up here at the top. And then I'm going to close my fields view. And so if I look all the way over to my one side, and I've got a lot of fields here because I've actually already joined these layers, but I can see I've got GeoID num here all the way at the far side. Now there's no values here in this field, so I have to populate this field with values. And I'm going to do that by just taking the value in my GeoID column and inserting it into my GeoID num column. And the GIS is going to know, oh, I need to convert this text value to a number. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to go to calculate field. And so now I'm going to say, okay, take my STL City block groups. I want to calculate the field GeoID num. And all I want you to do is go through and enter in that GeoID value, converting it from a text value to a number. I don't even have to give it those specific instructions. The GIS will know that because my GeoID column is a text value and my GeoID num column is a number. So it will automatically know that it should do that conversion for me. So I'm going to hit apply. Okay, so now I've got a GeoID numeric field that I can use to link up my data tables. All right, so let me close this. I'm going to go back to my block group. And first of all, I'm going to remove the join that I had on there before as I was preparing for this workshop. So I'm going to close that so you can see how to do this fresh. Okay. So whenever you're doing a joining a tabular join or joining spatial data to a table, you always start off with the spatial data layer in your table of contents. So I'm going to find my SDL City block groups layer. I'm going to right click and go to joins and relates and then add join. Okay, so it's going to say, all right, I'm joining STL City block groups number 1. It's the first one. I've got the layer duplicated in my table of contents here, but I'm going to use this first one. My join field that I want to join to use as my matching column is going to be GeoID num that I just created. And then my join table is going to be my CSV here. And GeoFIPS will be the number that I want to validate with, that I want to join with. So I'm going to click validate join. This is going to go through and it's just going to make sure that everything looks okay. All right. And after that finishes, it says the input table has 360 records and the join table has 360 records. Perfect. That's exactly what I want to see. Okay, so now here comes the big part of how I can actually visualize the new data that I have from Social Explorer on this map. Now the data exists in my attribute table. It's all the way here on the right-hand side. If I scroll over, okay, here's those 3 columns with those cryptic names that we saw before. All right, so the data is here. Now I just need to update the appearance of my layer to show this data how I want. So I'm going to close my attribute table. I'm going to go and make sure that my block group layer is highlighted here in my table of contents. And I'm going to go up to my feature layer, contextual menu, and the appearance tab. In the appearance tab, I'm going to click on symbology. How do I want to draw these layers? Well, right now, this layer is drawn with a single symbol, meaning every single feature is shown the same way. I want to show my layer by graduated colors. So draw quantities using graduated colors. Okay, so after I select that option, the symbology pane shows up here on the right-hand side. The field I want to show is my underscore 005. Okay, so this is showing absolute values. All right, so these are the actual numbers. If I wanted to change the color scheme or the color palette, I could certainly do that here. Maybe go back to a blue color palette. And so these darker census block groups have the highest absolute number of people 65 and older. Say I want to look at, instead of absolute values, I want to look at how I can easily compare the distribution of people 65 and older across my study area. Well, I would want to look at that in terms of a percentage. So what is the percentage of people 65 and older? So for that, I would bring in this normalization field here. So if I click on this drop down, I remember from looking at the data dictionary that my underscore 001 is the total population. So what this is doing is it's normalizing my absolute values into percentages. And now I can see, okay, these darker census block groups have 25 to 44, almost 45% of the population is age 65 and older. Okay, so from here, if I wanted, I could export my map, maybe add some other data layers, but that is actually another workshop, not this one particularly focused on Social Explorer. But this is just kind of taking you through the process of going from tabular download to a map if that is something that you're interested in.